My name is Colin Fox, and I'm presenting on The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down by Anne Fadiman. I'm going to go through a little bit of the story quickly just to get a little context, and then we'll talk about what we can learn from it. So this is a story of a Hmong family coming to the United States and working with the medical system. And we need a little background on them first to understand what happens. They lived in the mountains in Asia. They were always kind of a minority, and other groups tried to conquer them throughout their history, but they always failed, and the Hmong were able to retain their culture and independence, but at the cost of kind of constantly being on the move. And then during the Laotian Civil War, they ended up allying with the United States, and after that side lost, the United States brought a lot of refugees. And their experience is a little different than other immigrants because they didn't come to the U.S. seeking fame and fortune. They came because they felt it was part of the deal of them fighting in the war that they would get a safe place to live afterwards. And they also have this history of not assimilating, so they didn't come to the U.S. hoping to join the culture. They just wanted somewhere to live. And this is the story of Leah Lee, the girl in the picture there, and she had epilepsy. And in the Hmong culture, epileptics can communicate with the spirit world better, and they are kind of community leaders and high status people in that culture. So even though her parents were skeptical of Western doctors, her seizures were really bad, and they brought her to the doctor, and the doctors prescribed medicine, but the parents didn't. They were skeptical of the medicine, so they didn't always give it. And eventually, the doctors started testing her blood and figured out they weren't giving her the medicine, and they had Child Protective Services take her and put her in a foster home for a year. And after that, she got stabilized on medication, but even after returning home, she was still getting medication, but her condition got worse, and she had a severe seizure and ended up in a vegetative state. And it's not in the book, but most people in that condition don't live more than 5 years. But her parents took such good care of her, she lived all the way until age 30 and died in 2012. Okay, so what we can learn from this book, this is really a case study in the failure to communicate across cultures. And we're going to talk about the idea of interpreters versus cultural brokers, which is introduced by my favorite character in this book, this guy, Dwight Conquergood. He's an anthropologist, and he lived in the refugee camp in Thailand where the Hmong people were before they came to the U.S. And he was able to, the leadership of the camp wanted to vaccinate the dogs against rabies. And so they tried either sort of bribing the people in the camp with more food or threatening them in order to get them to bring their dogs in to be vaccinated. But the people didn't trust them, and they totally refused to cooperate. And we can see this is kind of in line with their history, that they are skeptical of outside authority. But Dwight, he lived in the tents with the Hmong instead of in the housing for Westerners where everybody else lived. He ate their food. When he got sick, he was treated by their shamans, and also he went and got regular treatment on the side. But he really took the time to understand their culture. So when it was time to get the dogs vaccinated for rabies, he had the idea to have a dog parade. And at the dog parade, he had people in costumes as characters from folk tales, and those characters explained rabies sort of in terms that the Hmong people could understand. And after the success of the parade and the sort of play of folk characters about rabies, everybody immediately came to the clinic the next day to get their dogs vaccinated. And he sees this success. He thinks he succeeded where everyone else failed because he treated them as equals and took the time to kind of communicate with them on their own terms instead of just ordering them around in a one-sided relationship where the Westerners had all the attention. And also, it respected their history of not respecting outsiders. It was brought to them in their own language. Not just literally their own language, but their own value system and way of understanding the world. Anyway, another successful case study that we can look at is the story of Francesca Farr. She was a social worker who had a patient who was not taking her medication. So Francesca took the time to go to her house, and at her house she also brought a Hmong person with her who understood kind of both cultures. And her cultural broker said, don't just talk to the woman, you need to talk to her husband. And even though Francesca was a feminist and this didn't really align with her value system, she put her own values aside and listened to the cultural broker. And then after that, the cultural broker said, oh, you can't just talk to him, you need to make kind wishes for his family. And eventually she did all these things, and he relaxed, and they actually had a conversation, and she figured out that he believed if his wife took the medication, the child would be born with no arms and legs. And she was able to have him feel her stomach and show that the baby was kicking and it already had arms and legs and it was big and healthy. And eventually he came to trust her, and they took the medication. They had a healthy baby, and it's a happy ending to this story. Sorry, I'm moving out the way. So the story here is she put aside her own beliefs and respected their culture, and they responded to her care and attention and respect by trusting and respecting her. And she was able to get the information across. So then this is Arthur Kleinman. He's a anthropologist at Harvard, but he built this set of 8 questions that can kind of get to the heart of what's going on between cultural understandings of illness. So you can see here, I've put the questions and I've put Leah's family's answers to them, or the author's interpretation of their beliefs anyway. And you can imagine how their answers are so different from a Western doctor with the same in the same situation. So they believed that Leah was sick because her soul got lost when her sister slammed the door, and the way to heal her was to have a shaman go to the spirit realm and retrieve her soul and try to lure it back into her body. And so they believed they were doing the right thing for her, and they thought the medicine was might help, but it wasn't really the core issue. So because the doctors and Leah's family were not able to have this conversation, they never understood why each side was acting so differently, even though they were doing the right thing in their own minds. And it ended up kind of tragically with Leah's vegetative state. And if they could have understood each other, they could have started to translate in appropriate cultural terms what was going on and kind of come to an understanding where they both respected each other and got things understood. Anyway, here's just a few of my takeaways for successful communication. 1, both sides need to be equal. 2 is doctors need to be aware that trying to force treatments on patients could be more harmful than respecting the patient's wishes. And that they really need to compromise. Anyway, thanks for watching.